So welcoming everybody in. And what we're doing right now is we're just starting by looking at the stories that are in our heads without even choosing. We're looking around the room, we're making note of what are the stories that are already here without us consciously choosing them. We've inherited them. They're in the osmosis, they're right there. And so we're seeing Janet's coming in from northern Wisconsin. Janet, she's like, well, you're an OG. You're in the original crew of Sacred Storytellers. It's so sweet to see you again. And Stephen's coming in from Vancouver, and Carol's coming in from Philadelphia, and Dana's coming in from Florida, and Daniela's coming in from Belgium, Morgan from the UK, Sheila from Nashville, Tennessee, from Symphony. What a fantastic name. Am I saying that right? From Sacramento, California. Sherry's coming in from Canada. Okay, so we've got a couple continents covered. And so I love hearing where you're from. And again, if there's something specific that you have alive in you that wants to be answered in the realm of story, if you're holding it in your body, it might just happen, just through osmosis. But also, if you want to pop it into your chat, please do. I'm going to make one request, and it's a really serious request. Please do not turn on the chat bot and ask for things to be translated. If you do that, I'm going to get harassed for the next hour with that box that won't stop coming up, and it's going to distract my train of thought. So I just really thank you for helping support a focused space, because it's just real. It's just real. Okay. This is a brand new thing that Zoom offered in the last week, and I haven't figured out how to turn it off yet. So Barbara Newman's coming in from the Berkshires, and I happen to know that Barbara's a wonderful author, and what a sweet treat to get to be in the company of so many beautiful souls. And thank you for coming on video, because your conversation in your body in terms of what happens, what comes alive in you sparks what comes alive in me. And one of the things that I understand about storytelling is that it's this ancient technology, and it requires this very specific piece to come alive. It requires our presence. It requires our presence, which it's really something I never would have thought about that, except like in the last month, it's been coming on live in me in a way that it never has. And probably because there's so much yanking at our presence in our modern day world. And so what is it as a storyteller to understand that one of the key things that's required for stories to come alive, for stories to hold coherence, power, and potency is our presence. And so I invite you into this delicious hour of full presence and to really start listening for yourself. That's what I'm going to really invite you into, to really listen for yourself in all of this. I'm going to pin my video for you, but also if you want to watch in gallery view, that's how I'll be watching you. And it's pretty awesome to have that experience, to see all of it. Okay, so let's dive into this journey together. I want to invite you to close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. But first, I'm going to start with a storyteller's prayer. The storyteller's prayer goes like this. May all the words that need to be heard be spoken, and may all the words that need to be spoken be heard. Ahio, 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 ahio. Hi, ahi, ahi, oh, ahi, oh. Ahi, oh, ahi, oh. Ahi, 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 oh, ahi, oh. Ahi, 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 oh. Ahi, 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 oh. My first question of the unweaving of your story, is what wants to come alive in you in these times? What are you in service to? And that might look like I'm in service to joy, I'm in service to peace, I'm in service to connection, I'm in service to healing, I'm in service to pleasure, I'm in service to the restoration of our planet, I'm in service to love. What is it that you are in service to? And if you didn't have to do anything else, there was nothing on the to-do list, if you could just do this one thing, this is kind of the soul contract. This is the agreement that some part of you may have made when it decided to come to this planet. Look, I'm already weaving a story. That perhaps there was a time in your soul energetic being that you said, I want to come to this amazing planet called Earth, and I want to be part of weaving the thread of my life, my energetic life force, into creating something. And if that story is resonant to you or already in a mythic telling, then perhaps you're in that greater story of, well, what's my soul contract? What did I come here? How did I want to use my voice? And in that question, I'm going to go a little bit more into like, what is there a story? If you are the story, is there a story that's inside you that's ready to emerge? Or is the muse knocking on your door, constantly filling you with inspiration, begging and pleading with you to midwife and birth the new stories of our time into presence? Or are you a cantadora, someone who is pretty rare among us, who says, I'm gonna be an archaeologist and find the old stories and the old wisdoms and the old knowledge, and I want to carry that and bring that into our time? And as we listen for the answers in these questions for yourself, I'm also asking, what is your relationship to the creation process? How aware of you are you to the internal stories that influence how you live in this outer world? So we're gonna go on a journey today, and I'm gonna give you a little spoiler alert. And the spoiler alert is that we are all storytellers. There's no distinction. I'm going to use this word a lot today. We are all storytellers. We're in it. And what I'm going to be doing today is taking you on a journey into the realm of sacred storytelling. And I'm going to start with a quote. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or to hate, to see or be seen. And often, too often, stories will saddle us and they will ride us and they will whip us onward and they will tell us what to do, and we will do it without questioning. I'm going to pause here because that word we is a tricky one. One of my teachers, elders, likes to, like, he scolds me often whenever I use that word we. Look, we already know that we're on, I don't know, at least 4 continents among us. We don't have a shared culture. We don't have a shared worldview. We don't have a shared perspective. So I think I'm very wary of using this word we, but I want to respect the author in terms of the greater point that she was saying. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear those stories, to question those stories, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. That's by Rebecca Solnit. She said in one paragraph what I'm going to say in the course of the next hour. And this journey that we go on to, like, what is it to become a storyteller in our times, and to really get to claim that role. That's what we're going to play with. Here's what we're going to accomplish together. I'm going to introduce you into the landscape of sacred storytelling. I'm going to go fast and furious. You might not catch everything. Just listen to that prayer that I held, which is, may all the words that need to be heard to be spoken. That prayer was for you. I asked you a bunch of questions, and I put out into our collective field that what you need to hear will come through. And then the second part of may all the words that need to be spoken be heard. That prayer was for the muse, for the spirit of story itself, for that which inspires me to take time on my Saturday morning to come hang out with you guys, because I'm so freaking passionate about sacred storytelling that it's not about getting paid. It's not about doing that. It's about saying, hey, this is big enough to take time to be together with just for the sake of being, because that's the spirit of this. And so may what it wants to say come through and land in the hands and the hearts and minds of those who are ready to catch it. I'm going to introduce you to an opportunity. I'm going to do a class. I'm going to talk a lot about different aspects of what it is to do sacred storytelling. I'm going to offer you a couple of tools that you can engage. And I'm also going to talk to you about, at the end, a creative community that's committed to this ancient art of sacred storytelling. And I'll tell you about a new program that's called the Alchemy of Story. And I'll also tell you a story. I'm going to give you a recipe for how to create your own wisdom story. So here's my first tip. Right when we began, I did two things. First, I asked for your voice. Right? I put my attention on you, and I did one of the most powerful things that storytellers do. They are the seers of the world. They said that in ancient times, the storytellers would travel from village to village, and if a child was misbehaving, they weren't banished, they weren't scolded, it was far worse. They were ignored. And that was considered the ultimate punishment, to be ignored by the storyteller, to not be seen. And so one of the first things that I did was I acknowledged you. I said, I see you. Right? I asked for your voice. I asked for your words. So that was one of the first things. This isn't just about me. This is about you. I took time out to do that. Okay. The second thing that I did was I created a Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore moment. Right? For those of you who were here, you heard me influence the resonance of our space. I brought song. Okay. That was one of the things that I did. So there's an 80-20 rule, that no story can come alive without the collaboration of both teller and listener. Has anyone here had the horrific experience of telling a story to nobody that was listening? Am I really the only person that's had this? Okay, right. It's such a bummer. If you hang out with teenagers or with a beloved who's heard your voice too long, or maybe you've been asked to tell something or share something in front of a very scattered, chaotic space, it's like, that it's truly no fun. And it takes so much energy to do that. Okay, so this is the 80-20% rule, where if you spend 80% of your energy creating that energetic field of stillness, where people can come fully present and they can catch your story, you get to catch the wave of that energy. It starts coming back towards you, and now you have more than enough energy to give. And now you have time and energy for inspiration to come through, because you're not trying to work so hard on attention. Now, we're not thinking, oh, I've got to get people's attention, but it's a scattered energetic in the field. And you came today to a class called Story is Ceremony, which that came to me as very inspired. I was like, story is ceremony. Why on earth would what is story is ceremony? I had to sit with it for a while, and I had a good laugh. I had a good laugh at it. I'm going to tell you a little small moment, because it's coming alive right now, which if you guys know Paul, oh gosh, Paul Stamets, the mushroom guy, right? I was interviewing him for a TV show that I was producing, and it was at the end of a long day, and he was exhausted. I'd spent 6 months trying to get this interview, right? He was so tired. The interview was so boring, and I had one of those moments where I was like, oh gosh, please, muse inspiration, like bring a question that will bring him alive, and this question came through, and I said, Paul, what do you love about mushrooms? So simple, right? What do you love? He lit up. He got this huge smile, and he said, their sense of humor. I'll think I know everything about what I'm doing with these tests around cancer and all this stuff, and I'll come in the next day and I'll look at the Petri dish and they'll be laughing at me, telling me I know nothing, you know? And I just love that piece of that. When we sit with a question long enough, it's like it's because the answer's there, right? And so, I come back to this idea of story as ceremony. Why on earth was I asking that question? I sat with it for a couple of weeks and then I had a good laugh because it was so obvious. And it comes right back down to what I was just talking to you about. That when we sit in ceremony, is that what's happening there is we are in a coherent collective field of agreement that we are focusing our attention on healing. Right? When you come to ceremony, we're coming in for prayer. It's an agreed upon piece. Maybe that happens in a church, maybe that happens in a temple, maybe that happens in the forest. It's like I'm wary of using words. Just think about what your practice is. Don't get distracted by the words that I'm using. And think about, those times when there's an agreement to place all of our attention onto one thing. And so, what I'm particularly passionate about is working with story as a tool that really gives us the techniques and practices and awakens our own internal technology for healing and transformation. And there's so much more to it, but that's a little piece of it. So I'm coming back to, one of the things that happened here is we created that Toto or not in Kansas anymore moment just so we could have this space of really aligning our energy and focusing our time together. And so you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can do that by, the other thing I did was I gave you a task. I asked you to listen for yourself. I gave you something to do. I provided you something to focus upon. I actually do this at all my storytelling events too. I give people a task right away. It brings people out of their to-do list. It brings them out of the, oh my God, the stresses of the taxes. It brings them into the moment and says, oh my gosh, there's something bigger in my human existence and it lives in my heart. It lives in my soul story. And can I have the grace of an hour or these few moments together to focus on that? So I mention these because this is something that a lot of times storytellers will often focus so much on what wants to come through that they forget that storytelling is about relationship. It's about connection. And every time I come to the threshold to tell a story, it stopped being about me and it started being about us. And that's to me that's what distinguishes a story from a sacred story. So let's and not that it's that linear, it's just not that linear. There's nothing about storytelling that's linear, but we'll use these words. So let's get into it. Let's start with the good stuff. Let's start with the good stuff. So the Hawaiians believe that that words are so powerful that they can stop the world, or like they can slow the world, or they can set it into motion. And if you have not had an opportunity to see a true hula dance, I strongly recommend go on Yuhu. Don't Yuhu YouTube. Don't go to the Elvis Presley version. Go watch modern day hula in its practice and get to see a culture that's alive and well and understanding the power of the spoken word and what it means to be in a fully embodied practice. That's what hula is. The Sicilians believe that words are so powerful that they can poke holes in the universe. The Australians say that the stories of the past must be sung to the present so that the future can exist. The Maoris say that the words don't describe a thing, they are the thing. In Japan, there's a word called kotodama. It means word spirit. And it speaks to the spirit of the word before it's even come into fruition and been spoken out loud. And all the ancient religions agree that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. Did you guys all catch that? Because it often takes me 3 times to get that one. I come from the East Coast where it's like in the water. I grew up just being slightly pessimistic and critical of all things. It's just a very natural way of being. It's a form of affection, so when I moved out to California, this whole like glass half full thing, it was like very like I just didn't quite get it until I started to hear this. And so I want to read it again because this to me is one of those pieces. When I heard it, the resonance was so strong that it stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, oh my God, this could be it. One of the keys to our humanity. That all the religions agreed that the world was sung, spoken, and chanted into existence. I'm going to read you a little poem because it's so beautiful. Magic Words. This is by Edward Field, and it was translated out of the Eskimo language. After Nalunguyak, in the very earliest time, when both people and animals lived on Earth, a person could become an animal if he wanted to, and an animal could become a human being. And sometimes they were people and sometimes animals, and there was no difference. All spoke the same language. That was the time when words were like magic. The human mind had mysterious powers. A word spoken by chance might have strange consequence. It would suddenly come alive, and what people wanted to happen could happen. All you had to do was say it. Nobody could explain this. That's just the way it was. So this way of being with words, it's an old thing. And when you listen to the old stories, one of my favorite things is to get to receive and be with stories from all around the globe and to find the patterns and to get to hear the things that they all repeat. And one of them, when we come back to where did the disruption happen on our planet, there are little hints in a lot of different cultures and a lot of different stories, but there's a pattern where they'll often talk about someone that had no name and no one knows where they came from. And they inserted something into the culture, into their community through a story or through words that changed everything. And so it's really interesting when we're in this time in our world where we're getting so much information, so many stories, and we can't see who the being is and we don't know where the stories come from. I digress. So a little bit about me. I'll just tell you a little bit about how I came to you today. And that's so funny. My webinar just went blank. I have no notes to share anymore. I'm gonna have to improv with you. I don't know why it's doing this. So part of my story is that I began to learn the magic of storytelling when I was very young, and I grew up on a farm in Vermont, and I got to wander around creeks and rivers and rocks and forests, and I didn't realize it at that time. It wouldn't be till about 25 years, maybe 35 years later, that what I was doing at that time was I was really beginning to learn the language of storytelling. And it was really through my relationship with the natural world. I started to learn the responsibility of storytelling, that what goes out comes back. It was when I wrote my first play. I was still in high school, and my best friend had just committed suicide. And I was going through so much grief. I didn't know how to process it. So I went to the place that was my sanctuary, which was writing, just to try to make sense of it. And that play was, won an award in a playwriting festival. I got to see it on the stage. And as I shared my grief, other people shared their grief with me. And that's when I really learned that there's a great responsibility. What we put out will come back. I started to learn the business of storytelling when I went straight to New York City after high school. I studied at Neighborhood Playhouse. I worked off Broadway. I did summer stock at Williamstown Theater Festival. And I learned that that was not my business. And I had no interest in speaking everyone else's words for the rest of my life. That was just not going to be my thing. What I was looking for a way to weave the threads of my passion, which there was this passion about the natural world and wilderness. There was a passion around social justice, and there was this passion around creativity and the arts. And I was really looking for a way to do that. And I thought that one of those ways, was going to be when I got a job working for Current TV, which was Al Gore's television network, which was hosting and producing the Green Channel at his television network. And that's when I really learned that good intentions aren't enough. Because to me, that was the dream job, right? I was doing it, I was weaving all those things. And I began to see that if you don't understand the power of story, that you could actually do more harm than good. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Where I truly learned the power of storytelling, like where I really got it in my bones, was when I started speaking my own words and when I started sharing my stories and when I started witnessing what was happening in other people, that it was much bigger than me. And I also realized something, and you guys probably know this if you're telling stories, that people are rarely listening to my story, that they're almost always listening to their own story told through mine. And so it began to put me into a greater path in terms of this isn't just about me, this is about us. Um, and the reason why I do these courses is because, like I said to some of you at the beginning, I have good advisors that, talk to me about what it is to have an online school. And they say, Leah, just record a good class and just give it to people and they can just watch it whenever they want. And to me, that is not in alignment with the spirit of storytelling. Yes, maybe you didn't get to join us and you're watching the recording, but I come on live because this actually embodies the true spirit of story. When we are together, when we're in this shared field together, when we can be in conversation together, when your animal body is talking to my animal body, Riva knows she's been to almost every single class I've ever done. They're always different. I'm always looking at the same script, except today, Riva, it's a new one. Um, but but new things come alive because of who's in the room. And that is so inspiring to me, in terms I feel the depth of people. And a lot of it's because I'm just really inspired to keep this ancient art form alive, to reclaim story from the marketers, from the capitalists who've started to use this technology against us and say, no, this is ours. This is one of our keys to humanity. This is our key to making it through these changing times right here. And so I'm really inspired by it. It's what gives me peace and joy through very unstable, crazy times, you know. And I'm also an evangelist, for story, and I have a program that I'm going to be telling you about. I'll be rolling out the red carpet, and so this is one of the ways that I get to do that. Um, so I'm going to enter into the big question. It's the big question that brought us all to here today. What is a story? What is a story? And I'm asking you in real time. You can write it in the chat if you want to, or if you want to say it out loud. But what is a story? And this is a place where we get to practice eloquence, meaning that if something's just coming alive and you have a tickle in you and you're like, I know that I want to say something, but I don't know what, you can practice eloquence, which is that moment of just taking a deep breath and allowing what wants to flow through. Those of us who are extroverts, we can do that. Do we have, how many extroverts are in the room? Right. It's really easy for us, right? Barbara's like, sometimes I'm an extrovert, sometimes an introvert, right? And like the introverts, the eloquence is a much harder thing to do because the introvert takes time to shape exactly what the idea is. They know what's going to come out before they say it. So these spaces can be a little bit more challenging for introverts when we're moving so fast. So I just really want to honor that. So if you want to speak it out loud or if you want to write it, what you say will feed our conversation. Alice is saying that a story is a portrayal of my own reflections and observations. Right. It's your point of view. It's your point of view. And I would even go so far as say it's your truth. Truth is a carpentry term. It means from point A to point B, meaning that we can all be sitting around a circle and we can see different things in the center, and we're all accurate about that truth that we're in. And what I love about stories and being a storyteller is it gives us the get out of jail free card, meaning that it widens our expansiveness and we can hold many truths at once without one being right or wrong. We can hold complexity. We need more storytellers who can see the wholeness of a story, who can hold the bigness of it. Marifran is saying story is an account of an imaginary or real people and events told for entertainment. Oh, interesting. Well, that was quite a definement to hold for entertainment. There's a lot of different reasons why we tell story, and what I like about this is that it's imaginary or real, right? It's like it's all complex. One of my favorite quotes is, "There's you can tell more truth in fiction." Sometimes we get so caught up in the information that we miss the point of what can be shared. And as storytellers, we get to do that. We get to bring something. If we can work with truth and imagination and bring a bigger piece into being. And we can do it in a way that's enjoyable, which is I want to touch on that, right? It's enjoyable. You can tell a wisdom story which has a lot of warnings and teachings in it in a pleasurable way that brings connection rather than, well, don't do that, no shaking of the finger, right? We get to be with people in a bigger way. Um, Marilyn's saying a story is looking deep in me and pulled a story that is a mix of my history and personality and a fiction from my mind. Right. That there's so much complexity in it. Pauline is saying that story is a spiritual practice. And one of the things that I think about sacred story, and I'm going to get into that in a moment, but it's this connection, it's an alchemy. It's literally an alchemy of what it is to be connected to earth and connected to spirit. So we're talking about really connected to the unseen worlds, and that it happens inside the vessel of our body, and it happens through this energetic expression. It gets rung up through our heart. It goes through our vocal cords. We give it a little bit of energy, and kaboom, it comes out in the form of words. And the next thing you know, we can start shaping reality. So it's quite an alchemical process that happens. Um, but I love what Pauline is saying, that it can be a practice. I started calling myself a story practitioner last year. I was like, what's that? It's such a weird thing, but it is true. It's like it's a practice to come to be in devotion of story. Barbara is saying story is a way to connect to the human experience and to each other and hold space for understanding, right? They've done so much research on this and all this research on television. And one of the things that they've started to really understand is how much a mind can be influenced when we get to hear story told from other people's perspectives. It goes from someone that becomes other and they to getting to reveal their personal experience and how much that shifts us and creates that kind of understanding. Nat Alleycat, what a great name. I like that. Is a story is a collection of events, ideas, and concepts that are only seen and heard because of the unique vantage point, ability, and skill of one articulating it into life. You guys are really on a bender, and I'm fascinated because you're really talking about one person's point of view. There's something emerging in us, right? It's a point of view, it's a perspective, and you can hold it with power. And like what does that mean to be able to do that and to be bold in it? Angelina is saying that story arrives from being human, forms into a universal tapestry, and connects us into a shared poetic spiritual experience. I love that. Danis is saying that it's imagery of spirit being painted with spoken word and mythological transfer of energy. Oh my God, you guys are poets. I love this. It's magic moving through form, says Constance. And Sheila is saying that story is an experience that we feel compelled to share. Right. And that feeling, I want to land on that word for a second. Right. We actually feel someone else's story. There's a resonance. It wakes something up in us, for better or for worse. And that's one of the things that we actually talk about in the Story for Alchemy course, is that there is a transference of energy that happens in the experience of story. If I have a bunch of fear in me and I start talking fear and you've got fear in you, I might start feeding those seeds of fear. If I have bravery and courage and how to go to the depths of my soul and really understand what it is to move through grief, and I share that story with you, then perhaps you're going to get some more courage to become alive in the grief that lives in you. And the same way, it's like we give each other these gifts. If you know how to heal a broken heart, or you know a thing or two about forgiveness, and you share your story about that, you might open new windows of possibility in my world. So one of the things that I think about, a very ugly description of what a story is, and what it does is it references the technology, the most recent technology, which humans often use that as a reference point. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say that it's wow, Reva, I forgot the word. That's amazing. It's an operating system. I was going to say program, but it's an operating system. And it's an operating system that teaches us our beliefs, our values, and what we believe is possible. Okay, now just think about the children's books that you came to read. Think about, um, the stories that were told around your table. Think about your family stories about what you could do and what you couldn't do in regards to your work, in regards to your relationship, the expectations. They're surrounding us, these stories. And all of a sudden, I really believe if you are not telling your story, you could accidentally end up landing in the story that someone else has about you. I had the most beautiful experience about this. I walked into a family situation, and I was a certain way for many years, and I've grown and I've changed and all this different stuff. I went back in, this was just last summer, and someone in my family was like, "Well, you blah 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 blah," and I was like, "Well, yeah, that was me 5 years ago." But was that me 5 minutes ago? I don't think so. you know and they were like, "Oh, you're kind of right." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am kind of right." But I saw what was happening, that like we don't get to see each other that much, and so that they had held me in this one role for a really long time. And so if I wasn't clear about writing my own story, I could have so easily fallen back into playing that role. Family systems, it's the easiest example, right? Every time we walk into the family home, it's just like kaboom, there we are, right again. You know, so, or maybe I shouldn't say we, excuse me. That's the experience I have. So when we talk about story and it's an operating system, it's like we're surrounded by them. And they're needling at us consciously and unconsciously. Now, I was walking through the woods, and oftentimes I get the inspiration for what I share to you from the woods, from the ocean, and I was walking through the woods of Topanga, and I swear to God, the trees were like, "Leah Lamb." I knew I was in big trouble when they used both my names. They were like, "Leah Lamb, you've got to stop using that just grotesque description of a story." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it's like, it kind of just gets us straight to the point. I only have an hour." And they're like, "No, no, you've got to tell them the truth." And I'm like, "Okay, trees, what's your truth?" And they're like, "A story is a library of the soul." And I was like, "Oh gosh, that is so much more beautiful." I have to give the trees of Topanga the credit for that, or the rocks, or whoever was speaking out loud. And it is bigger than that. It brings us into the bigger expression of more than just what it is to be human, going through the realities of what it is to be alive in 2024. It gives us capacity to call on the wholeness of all of ourselves throughout time. It gives us capacity to call on ancient wisdom, on ancient knowledge that's more than I can actually hold in this moment in time. And so I want to talk a little bit more about what does that mean, in terms of because we have an idea of what a story is, but what's a sacred story? And do we have ideas? What is a sacred story? I know you guys are going to have all different kinds of ideas. What is a sacred story? First of all, I'm going to tell you, as I'm sure some of you are writing, it's kind of a setup. Because as soon as we call one thing sacred, we're saying, "I see the life in you." We're calling something else, we're saying something else is not sacred just by employing the language. So hopefully we'll get to like eliminate the language and just see all things as sacred, meaning that I see the life in you, right? Sherry's saying it's a universality that it brings us all together. Mary Fern is saying it's a story of our larger humanity. It's a story of the religious giants, it's Marilyn. Okay. What I understand when I'm employing the language sacred story, it's saying I see the divinity in you, I see the life force in you. So when I hear a sacred story, I know that I'm in relationship with a story that has a life force in it and that life force is here to serve life itself. It's going to keep the wheels of life going. When I'm in the presence of a sacred story, I feel connected. My nervous system oftentimes feels a little bit more at ease. I feel more open. I'll come out feeling a little bit more loving. And gosh darn it, I want to get up tomorrow morning and exercise, quit sugar, and I'll quit caffeine too. It's like I feel more alive in life. I feel more committed to life. Now, look, a sacred story. Did anyone see Life is Beautiful? Anyone get to see that? It's about the Holocaust, right? To me, that's an amazing example of a sacred story. It took you to the edges, it showed you all the darkest parts of humanity, but then it also showed you a way through. And that's a beautiful example of what is a key aspect to a sacred story, and a key aspect to being a storyteller as guide. In Welsh, there's a term. The term for storyteller means guide between the dimensions. Isn't that kind of amazing? It means a little bit more than that. I'm simplifying it. And so when we look at that, you say, okay, well, if I'm your guide as a storyteller, I'm going to guide you towards grief. I'm going to guide you towards looking at what's not working well on this planet. I'm going to guide you to looking at the darkest things so that we can make this journey together. And in order for people to go there with you, to go to a place where they could actually open to see something new, they've got to trust you. They need to know that you're going to bring them back home. And there's too many storytellers out there right now that are taking people to the darkest parts of society and just dropping them off and leaving them there. Those stories I would call zombie stories. And so when we're looking at a sacred story, one of the key pieces that it's like that it's trustworthy, there's going to be beauty in it. Right. You can take me to the bowels of grief and horror, but when there's beauty present, you're feeding my soul all along the way, and I know that I can make it through. That's one little key thing. It's a little tip, by the way, if you're dealing with hard to tell stories. Just infusing small bits of beauty along the way, gives it a bigger expression of life. So a zombie story, let's just, you're like, oh, that sounds all poetic, nice. Sacred stories. So what's a zombie story? It's going to quickly help you start identifying them. And I start saying, okay, this is us putting on our sacred storytelling goggles, right? Where yeah, Reva's got hers on, and it's like putting on the windshield wipers on a rainy day, on your windshield. And without your sacred storytelling goggles, it's like, you can't see clearly. It's all out there, and you're like, well, So a zombie story. An example of a zombie story, first of all, you kind of know them because I don't know about you, but when I'm around them, I kind of want to die a little. I start thinking, well, maybe people are bad for the planet, or maybe all people do kind of suck, or it's really easy to other people, and I start feeling more separated, more disconnected, and I start coming up, well, it's much better just to be alone. It's like all these things. These are quick. They might be infused with fear. They might be infused with separation. These are quick ways that you can discern, is this a zombie story or is this a sacred story? Is this separating life or is this in service to life? These are simple questions that we can ask every day to the stories that we're telling ourselves about our world and about the world at large. Okay, so a zombie story, quick example, Jaws. So Jaws was written by Peter Benchley. It was produced by Steven Spielberg. That was the very first movie that was ever produced on the open ocean. Look, if you don't speak language, the language of story, which this language of story speaks through symbol, myth, and metaphor. What is metaphor but the language of spirit in the shape and form? So if you might not speak the language of story, but the language of story speaks you. And so when Jaws was filmed out in the open ocean, first time that many people saw that, what does the ocean symbolize for so many people? But our consciousness. And so now we put the prop for a shark, which broke. So now we only saw a piece of it, right? So now it instantly goes into the symbolic reference. And what does the shark represent in Jaws but our fear of death? What's the oldest story on the planet all about? Gilgamesh, our fear of death. you know? And so all of a sudden the shark takes on this symbolic reference almost all around the globe as being, connected to our fear of death. More people die every year from coconuts falling off of trees than sharks. Isn't that a crazy statistic? And yet there was a collective agreement that we needed to eliminate this keystone species, which was the key to our own life. When Peter Benchley, the author of Jaws, discovered what his story did, he spent the rest of his life as an ocean protector. So I mention this because I don't think that there's about a bunch of bad people out there trying to do bad things, but I do think that we're coming into our own evolutionary consciousness of remembering and realizing how powerful our stories are and how we really need to be response able to for what we put out into the world, and making sure that we have the right places to process different kinds of stories when they're among us. So, um, sorry, I wanted to tell you a little bit about this idea of, or just ask you about, like, where are you in alignment to your soul contract? Where are you? Where are you? And I want to give, oh gosh, I can't remember anybody's names these days. It's like my memory is like doing this little Swiss cheese thing. And the fellow that I heard that term from, he wrote a book called The Third Way. I just want to give him credit. I can remember his book. Like I can remember the stories he tells. I can't remember his name right now. But he came up with that way of saying response able. I just love that. So if we play with this idea that we all came in with a little bit of a mission, that we came with a mission, a task on planet Earth. And it's one of the reasons why so many of us are saying, like, well, why am I here? It's like it's because there's an answer that's bubbling inside of us. And so this is just a moment when you can come in and say, well, what, like, I just want to explore, like, where are you in alignment with your soul contract? And I'll tell you a little story that, like, around me where that question came alive, which I went to, the edge of the cliff, looked over the ocean. I went with that big prayer of like, would you just show me the way, please? I was getting frustrated. I was trying to figure out how to make a living that was in alignment with my passion, my purpose. And I was like, God, it was more than a desperate prayer. It was like I'm an all in prayer. And when I went all in, where I was truly committed, where I was so humbled that I could actually hear, and I heard something come back, nothing. And I was like, well, that's not me talking because I was in my 30s and I knew everything, So I was like, and the voice said, nothing, take long walks and listen. This is a longer story that I'm not going to get into right now. But what ended up happening through that space was a great big story arrived on my doorstep. And it was a story that arrived, and I wasn't expecting it. I never wanted to write a novel. That was not my cup of tea or my idea of fun. And and yet it came through. I wrote into the night, I wrote into the morning, and it was really capturing that story and committing myself and dedicating myself to the creation of that story that I started this world of sacred storytelling and really understanding what it is as really kind of a gateway to the mysteries of life. That's how it all opened for me. And as I was leaving the place where that story first came alive, I swear to God, I was driving away, and this turkey vulture feather fell out of the sky and landed right in front of me. And it was like my sign. It was like my sign from the universe. It's like, yes, you're on the path. And by the way, this is always going to be your sign. And to this day, every time I see a feather, I pick it up. And every time I pick up that feather, it's my recommitment. It's my recommitment to saying, I see the gift that I was given, and I will continue to give that piece until it comes through. I know Barbara knows a thing or two about this, having written a profound, beautiful book. So we all have our signs, and so I'm asking you in this moment to say, like, well, what's your feather? What's that thing that tells you you're on the path? And it might be a question that you just linger with, or it might be, the big question that you actually have an answer to. And if you do, and you want to put in our chat box, I love getting to see that, because as we say things and hear things, It inspires us. The reason I'm asking you is that you came to this because you felt some kind of resonance. The thing that sparks me is, and I received this gift. I got to be around a couple of, there were three key people in my life, but when I got to be in their presence, it wasn't just what they were teaching, it's what was alive in them that brought what was alive in me into being. And so I really want to honor them. Carolyn Casey. Oh my God, I had never knew that a woman could work with words that way. You know, Michael Mead. I had no idea that storytellers weren't just for kids in libraries until I saw him speaking with it, and working with men and juveniles and like all these different things. And Martin Shaw, he was the one that gave me permission to weave together and really give me a way to understanding that story and the natural world were one and the same and were deeply connected. And there's more. There's, Sean Kane, Iriel Spilsberger. There's so many people. But the reason why I say what's your feather is it's such a great thing to be listening for. What is that thing that tells you I'm on my path? Barbara saying it's when the winds speak, the feather and heart rocks. Oh, I'm a heart rock person too. Kiara's saying life sends me the people, things, ideas that I need to live, the vision. Right. So when we come into sacred storytelling, it's really about relationships. And it's about a relationship to ourself, this amazing body that is our tool for expression. It's about relationship to the story itself. What we said, it's got this living being. And through that, it's like being in relationship to the unseen world. One of the reasons why I love being a storyteller is because I get so much guidance and insight that my little ego brain could never get access to if all I'm thinking about is the next thing that has to get done. It creates a spaciousness for me to hear from whatever your language is. Is it the ancestors? Is it the divine? Is it the muse? Is it the unseen world? Is it the earth speaking out loud, as Sean Kane says? It's like these stories that give us this access point to the bigger multidimensional selves that we are. And also, when you're really in relationship to a story, that's why I said, please turn on your video so I can see you, because I'm picking up information from you all along the way. The biggest hint to me when I'm talking story is if somebody sneezes or coughs, I know that I've lost them. I know it sounds really strange because you're like, well, come on, people just sneeze and cough. But it will indicate to you in a moment that you are not in right relationship, that something has schismed, that you're not fully present. When people start jittering and they're kind of going all over the place, then that's information for me. It's also that's another tip number 4. You know, don't be so thinking that it's about you or it's about your story. It's about the people who are catching it because they're the garden where the seeds are going. So if you know that what you have is so valuable, that the gift that you have could actually change a life, isn't it worth doing the work to make sure that you've built a steady home or a steady garden where it can grow within? There's also like being attuned to the relationship to the times that you're in. Not old stories should be repeated. It's like it's really like, what are the stories that are needed, that are being called for in these times? And then there's also this thing about being in relationship to the space that you're telling. And this kind of gets to that real radical presence. If you're telling a story and an ambulance goes by and everybody hears the ambulance and it kind of shakes the moment out of you, that time when you're walking with gnomes and unicorns, you got to weave it in. You weave it in because you weave in the full presence, and then it brings people back in. It's a magical little tip and trick. So the more present you are with what's really happening, the more present people can stay in the world that you're leading them, guiding them into. So here's a little idea of what is the journey of a sacred storyteller. Oh my gosh, I'm almost at 12 o'clock. How are you guys on time? Do you have a little bit more time? Okay. I'm going to try to wrap this up the next 5 minutes, but I wanted to talk to you about this piece. This is the journey of a sacred storyteller. So first, you got to court the muse, the unseen world. This isn't just you. And you can look at this where if you're working with stories as medicine, for teaching skills, for wisdom stories, for vision stories, especially when you're working for stories, a tool for healing. I didn't get into this mess by myself, right? Whatever is bothering me, whatever is creating the discontent, whatever is creating the suffering, it didn't happen by myself. So how on earth could I think that I could get out of it myself? And story can actually be an incredible ally when you open to it. But when you understand that it's not just you creating it, it's you're actually doing it with the unseen world, with that life force, the force of life itself. And that I'm going to use that word as the muse. And so you want to make sure that, there's a clean house going on up here. You've got to have some psychic silence so that the muse has a place to speak. I also love hearing that the muse, she loves beauty. You got to have a clean desk. I don't always have a clean desk, but she likes a clean desk. She likes flowers. She likes chocolates. It's like these things that we do to court the unseen world will start to feed and court us, if for nothing else, to show us our visual reminder of our commitment. Then once you start getting in there and you start saying, yes, I'm going to create, you're going to run into some barriers. Now, I don't believe in writer's block. I'm afraid to say that. I don't believe in it. I do believe in initiations, that sometimes we hit a wall and it's life saying, look, you want to go further? You're going to have to let some things go. You're going to have to do some more sit-ups and push-ups. You're going to have to get some more core strength, or something in you needs to grow and get it stronger. And you're going to have to refine some more skills. And then, because what's waiting for you on the side needs the next upgraded version of yourself, right? And so I love hitting a good barrier or a good boundary, because it means that I finally made it there. I made it to the end of level 1 or level 2. I'm looking like, I don't know. I don't play games on videos, but like that's we're playing Mario Brothers here. It's like that's one way of looking at it. Then you got to be able to look behind you. You got to know the stories that you're from. I just came out of Passover, and Passover, one of the key parts is that it's all about carrying one story forward. And one of the key parts, this one story, is to remind people that when a piece of the story is forgotten, oh gosh, some bad things can happen. you know and that's literally the key of why they carry this one story forward, is to give a warning of when we don't carry forward the whole story, weird things can happen. So that's one example of, you got to know your culture, you got to know your family stories, you got to know the story of the place that you live. You got to look within you and then to see, what are the stories that created me, and so that you can know them and define them, decide if those are the ones that you want to continue to go forward. Then once you're there, you're kind of like cleaning house, as you get, then you're like, well, who do I want to be as a storyteller archetype? I'm gonna go into that in just a minute. Then you get to stand in the power of your gift. You've done all this work and you're like, okay, I got something. I know what I got to give. I'm going to start giving it. Maybe it's the gift of forgiveness. Maybe it's the gift of I know how to heal a heart. Maybe it's, I know that when I get around other people, I just awaken some seeds in them. Doesn't even matter what the story is. It's like, what's your gift that you've got? That's when we come into developing your skill and craft. This is opposite. Look, when I started training, as in theater, they went for skill and craft first. But this is, as they now train, they've understood that more children test as genius before the age of 5. And between the ages of 5 and 7, it goes down to like something like 5%. And that we're training that we're closing the gates for people to understand and really stand in the genius of their uniqueness. Some of you know that I do a mystic form of storytelling, where I sit before someone and I receive their story through myth, metaphor, and symbol. No acting school was ever going to teach me how to do that. It was in having places to listen and practice and being around a community that was like, yeah, we want to see what you got. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so inspired to create these kinds of places where people can really explore their genius, because I had that firsthand experience of getting to do that in a world that doesn't really make a lot of space for that. Then you got to listen for what's needed. It's not just about what wants to come out. It's like, what does the world need from you? What is the world calling from you? Then you got to know how to change a story. And we're surrounded by some big, powerful, dangerous stories. And they can be changed, but there's rules to changing stories, and there's rules to changing old, powerful stories, and it's important to know them. You can alchemize your stories into medicine for yourself and for others. And then we're talking about, oh, there you go, in the gift. Now, if you want to look at, we all are at different stages of our lives. We have different ways of talking story. Some of us are going to be young. They're going to be truth tellers. Not that you have to be young to be a truth teller, but they're going to be the reflectors. They're going to be like, this is what's wrong with the world. I want you to know about that. Some are going to be midwives, and they're going to say, I'm here to help birth the new stories of our time. Some are going to be mentors. They're going to say, I'm going to give you wisdom stories. And every time someone comes and asks me for a yes or no, do this or that answer, I'm going to give you back a story so you can understand what it is to find the truth that lives within you. Some of us are going to be healers, and we're going to be telling medicine stories, stories designed to heal the broken stories of our times. Some of us are visionaries, and we're here to plant the seeds of tomorrow. Some of us are archaeologists and the cantadores, finding the old stories, digging them up, finding the bones of the stories and giving them life so that they can keep living and walking among us. And it's not that we're one or the other. We can play different roles at different times, but the more clarity you have on what you're doing, the stronger your potency and power. When you put these together, look, it makes a web, which is the archetype of the storyteller. So I love that. So another couple of ways of looking at this is that it goes through our bodies, that stories have these energetic bodies, they live in us. And so the programs that I'm really excited to share with you are the ones that give you the tools and techniques for how to clear these stories out of your system so you get more access to your life force power. So I'm going to tell you a little story. And this is my story. And I'm going to give you an example of what a wisdom story is. And then at the end of the story, your class will be complete. And so if you feel complete, you can go on your way. And if the seeds of sacred storytelling are banging and singing and dancing, and you want to learn more about the program, I'll take about another 5 minutes after that and just share with you that program. So here's the story. This story begins. That's the first line. It's a great story. Where does the story really begin? That's your first prompt. The place where this story really begins was when I was 5 years old. I lived in this home. My mom was a painter. Her friends were artists, and one of them had actually embroidered this beautiful picture of this woman who was serving children flowers. And on this tapestry, it was written, Leah, my name was on it. Leah, give what you have. To others, it may mean more than you dare to think. And I would read that over and over and over again. Leah, give what you have. To others, it may mean more than you dare to think. I had no idea what it meant until the day when I was 29 years old and I was in a doctor's office, sitting across from a table. I had just been diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and he was giving me this contract. And on this contract, it said that he was going to cut across my larynx, and it was very possible that I could lose my voice. So I'm going to pause here. This story didn't begin on the day that I was diagnosed with cancer, right? This is a story of a soul. Now, had I tried to find that connection on my own brain, I never would have done it, right? But it's that question of how open can you go? When you know that there's a story that you're going to tell, ask that key question. Where did this story really begin? You're creating a constellation of your whole life. So when he came to me in that moment, now we're going for the critical story where this is not my story, right? Who cares about me getting cancer? Let's talk about your story, the universal story. So that's what I'm going for now, is that universal theme. Okay. When that doctor came to me, it was like he was coming to me with this purple velvet pillow with this tiara of victimhood, and he was offering it to me. And I have to tell you something. I had played the role of the victim very successfully for a very long time. I knew my lines. I could out victim story anybody in the room. It was like a sport. And all of a sudden, when this guy was coming to me, being like, here you go, I'm going to crown you queen of victim, some part of my soul snapped on board and was like, oh, hell no, I do not want to play that role anymore. And as soon as I meant it, all of a sudden, it was as if this escape hatch just opened in the room and I jumped on through, and I had no idea what was on the other side. But I did know that I had a commitment to laugh rather than just sob and cry and feel in pity, self-pity. And that desire to be in the love of life is what carried me through. And so every time I met a doctor, every time my blood was drawn, all of the times, every single time, I would make sure that I fulfilled this one simple task, which was to make us laugh. The surgery happened. It took way longer than anyone expected. I was very, very lucky. I had the best doctors. We were at the end, they come out, they start giving you medication. Nobody knows what kind of medication to give someone when they lose their thyroid. Every body is so different. And what happened to me is that they gave me way too much and I was on speed. I jumped out of the hospital. I was so excited. I healed faster than anyone had ever seen before. There's a backstory of how I learned the power of prayer. And I called up all my friends and I was like, let's build a garden, and they're like, Leah, you're crazy. You just got out of the hospital. I'm like, I know, I've got all this energy. I've got to use it. So they were kind to me and they gathered around and we created this 70-foot spiral garden. Well, guess what happens when you're on speed for a long time? It turns into exhaustion. And I went into like a deep depression because all I had was just enough energy to get up, walk in that garden, get myself to work, get myself home, and that was it. And I was really not wanting to keep going on life if that was it. But every morning I went to that garden. And in that place of being so humbled by life, I started to listen in a way that I'd never been able to listen before. And I started to hear things that I'd never heard before. And every time I started to walk the spirals of that garden, I said my prayers of gratitude. I knew nothing about gratitude. Oprah was not talking about gratitude. It was not trending. It really came out of the roots of that earth. And every time I walked out of that spiral, of that garden, I walked with a prayer. I walked with a prayer for this life. And I wholly believe that it was that prayer that brings me to you on this day. To say, give what you have. To others, it may mean more than you dare to think. And so if you ever find yourself on a ship that is sinking and the ocean is stormy and the sky is dark and it seems like all is lost, may the moon come down and shine a bright pathway to land so that you know that you're guided, so that you know that there's more than just you in the world holding and carrying you through. And may the waves of life carry you home and put you back on your own 2 feet. So I ended that story. I did 2 things. I brought us a little bit back to the beginning, right? I weaved through, what is this story really about? It's a soul story, right? That started when I was 5 years old. But I also ended with a story blessing. And that idea comes from John O'Donohue. And this is the quickest, fastest way to exit a story and nobody noticed that you didn't finish, right? Because you blessed them. You blessed them with the deepest lesson that lives within your story without overly defining. You're speaking through language of metaphor. You're allowing the story to speak greater than your own experience. That's another technique that you can use. So if you feel complete with your class, ta-da, you're done. And you can wave and say goodbye and have a great day. And if you want to hang out for another 5 minutes and learn a little bit more about the alchemy of story, then I'm going to share this with you right now. So a blessing to be with you today. And I have to tell you guys, I'm in love with this program. And it's not every day I get to say that. I've developed a lot of programs and it's like they do a lot of different things. And this program is like, and some of you know a little bit of my story. I thought I was done teaching. I thought, last year I said, this is it, I'm done. And now I'm going to give my platform over to other people. And life had another idea in mind. And so I said, okay, what wants to happen? And the Spirit of Story said the graduate program. Let's get to the graduate program of what is this idea of sacred storytelling. So those of you may or may not know, if you're new to me, I've been teaching online for since like 2013, 2014, no, 2017, excuse me. I've been teaching in person since 2014, but online since 2017. And we've had way over 40 guest teachers now that have come through our doorways. Just include, I like going after the pioneers, the legends, and the people that you might not know of who have strong, potent offerings to give. We've had over 1,000 learners come through our doorways over the last 7 years. This program is really my expertise of what it is to teach online in a way that makes it accessible, useful, meaningful. I have taught a lot of different things. I've seen how sometimes really long programs where you have to meet often, that people fizzle out and they don't quite get it, and it's like it's not just about getting the tuition money for me. It's about having the potent experience of all of us growing together. As you grow, I grow. All of our experience is intrinsically connected. So I'm in it to win it, in the meaning that of creating really potent places that really serve people. And so the way that this program is designed is it's actually designed for busy people. And so we're actually going to meet 5 different times over the between now and I think next March. And we meet on Thursday evening to have a little juicy story experience. Then we meet in an intensive experience Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And in that time, you get to be fully held in the container. You get to dream with us. You get to create with us. I'll never talk this much in that time at once. It's really about we get a little bit, then we go practice, then we get some feedback, then we create some more. You get to create on your own. It's a whole thing. So, but one of the things that brings us together is that it's people who are really wanting to engage this idea of what is it to be a sacred storyteller in our times, either in our personal lives or be standing as guardians for others. You're saying, I want to be a pillar for change. And if that means who I stand next to the post office and how I speak about the world, it's like it can happen in so many different ways. These are most of our teachers, but there's actually a couple of teachers that aren't on here. And what you're seeing is a combination of people who hold so many different threads of storytelling, different from all around the globe, different perspectives. Some of them are out and out like real storytellers, Indigenous elders who hold the transmission of story. That's one of the best ways I believe that you can really learn storytelling is getting to be in the transmission of it. Some of them are healers, and I'll talk a little bit more about why they would be here. Some of them are absolute pioneers. John over here, he created playback theater. Carl over here is a real amazing in the world of narrative storytelling. Gigi over here does, she wrote the book on counsel. And when I went to her, I was like, Gigi, we need you. And she was like, why? I don't teach storytelling. And I was like, no, but you know how to create spaces that hold stories, that hold the people for it hear each other. So it's a real diverse group of people that will really guide you. And my big question to all of them that was the requirement is that they're all going to teach you specific tools, techniques, and practices. So you're going to leave having not just been exposed to my brand of story, but also having all these different all these different ones. There's 18 teachers altogether that will be with us. So the way that it works is that, you have these different modules. Our first one is coming up May 2nd through the 5th. It's just next week. And the theme is story as ceremony. And what this one is really doing is how to prepare you to be that clear vessel. So we're going to talk more about the energetics of story. We have Lahua Ryder, who's coming in from Maui. She's a Hawaiian elder who will be talking about story and healing and ceremony. Heather will be coming from the Black Swan Sanctuary, and she's talking about how to be a guardian for change and how facilitation and what it is to hold group fields of energy. And one of the things that I really have tended while I've done a lot of story ceremonies is that people will project a lot onto you. And when I started to realize why so many people had real legitimate fear about getting up and speaking in front of others, I don't think it's just the jitters. I think that there's an inherent human understanding that if you don't understand how to be in right relationship to your energetic field and how other people can take from it or put things onto it, it's like it really does affect our health, our well-being, our consciousness Same thing if you're a therapist. This ability to be able to have healthy, clear boundaries, to know the distinction between what it is to witness somebody's stories versus unconscious agreements to carry people's stories. These are the kinds of things that we're going to get into, along with how to create story maps of your great big story, and also how to really get into what are the stories in you that need to be cleared so that you're a real clear vessel for yourself and for others. Module 2, we're going to get into returning to the bones. We're going to the roots of your stories. We're going to learn origin stories from around the globe. You're going to get to focus on learn some cultural stories that come from your heritage. And you're also going to get to start touching into your personal mythos. So we're going to start talking on the power of mythology and understanding your greater mythic soul story. Our module 3 is going to be looking at really how do we work with storytelling for trauma and major life disruptions. This is how do you create those wisdom stories? I told you the story of
Yeah, you froze. Do you know that you froze?
I don't think she does.
if you are still here and you want to keep hearing about it, there we go. Hi there. Um, how to be with changing stories as they happen. That's amazing. So are there any questions so far that people have about the program and how it's working? And I'll keep talking a little bit more also, but if there's any questions that have emerged before I spend 2 more minutes finishing it. No. Okay. I will
Times,
yes.
times would be helpful. And
Times.
all the dates. I didn't got 3 dates.
The dates
Frozen went away.
are, hold on. So we meet on so for times it's Pacific Standard Time on Thursdays from 7 to 9 p.m. And there's you actually get to experience a storytelling ceremony. And then on the weekends, it is 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. What we do is we try to find that time where people from as many time zones as possible can engage. So those are the times. And then I'm going to send an email out in just a moment with all the links. So I'm going to give you all the dates and that'll all be there. But basically it's every 3 months is a general thing. And then what I'll explain is that for people who want, there's 2 different ways that you can play with this. And I'll explain that in just a second. But in terms of who you'll meet, Roxanne was just, Janet might remember Roxanne, it was when one of the first classes, and she came and visited one of our free master classes last week. And she said, Leah, I'm still meeting with the people in my small group from when I first started all those years ago. And I am forever inspired by people who come. It's everyone from elders who just really want to learn how to give their gifts so they can continue to carry on and really understand the power of their voice, to Anna here, who was presenting a paper in Parliament of Portugal and use the storyteller's prayer to hold presence and clarity. I've seen heads of marketing agents come, and even though I swear up and down that I will not teach you story to work for marketing, but I will guide you in understanding the ethics of powerful storytelling. Journalists to therapists to leaders in different places to just people who feel like they want to bring in the power of their life. And that's what I found is that that's what this is doing. It's bringing you into the power of life. Um, in terms of what happens, what you're going to walk away with, is you will walk away from the 5 modules. You're going to walk away with a lot of different stories that you can tell other people, stories that you've created yourself. Every module, you'll have an opportunity to create at least one story. You're also going to walk away with a global community. And that's one of the things I love and I'm so inspired by is that these are people where all of our compass is on north. We come from different perspectives. We come from different belief systems. We even have different political ideology, but somehow we can meet in this place of story. And it's such a powerful thing. So it's a great thing for your network and for your allies. You're going to learn very specific tools, techniques, and practices from 18 different teachers that you can take and apply to your personal life and to your professional life. You're also going to get ways that you can integrate this into all along the way. So while we meet every few months for that really intensive time, every week you'll be given, I call it a buffet. You know, you'll get a creative prompt. You'll get something that will support you and helping anchor in and integrate and practice what we're talking about. And so in terms of, you can do this 2 different ways. You can say, I just want the modules. I want to have my own personal experience. I want this to be for me. And if you're saying, oh, some people come because they're saying, I want to birth a big project and I want a really strong container to support me, or I'm really wanting to integrate this into my work and my livelihood. I know I want to support other people. That's what the certification is really created for. So along with the 3.5 day certifications, you also get a small group of greatness. And this year I'm doing something I haven't done since the very beginning. I'm matchmaking people. So as people come in and I really hear what people are working on, I'm having a lot of fun being like, oh, that person should be in a group with that person because they're gonna create well together. They're really focused on this same kind of similar things. And so this group you can work with in between our sessions to have those practice sessions. We as a group have 12 monthly meetings. You also get 2 private sessions with me. And the reason why we do that is because you have a practicum and for the certification. And what that means is you'll do a presentation of your ideology of what is it to work with story for healing. And we have one woman that just registered. She's really working the heroine's journey. And what does that mean? And she wants to support other people in that way. So she'll be talking about that. Another woman is working with grief circles, and she's a grief doula, and she's integrating story into that. And so it's really about marching to your own drum. That's what excites me, is helping you really come into clarifying your own voice, your own purpose, your own mission, and what kind of shape and form does that want to take, and how to be in a container that really holds you and supports you through that. This I kind of just talked about already. And this this is kind of funny. I'll tell you that people were saying, like, they're like, Leah, you have to get really tangible about what people get out of this. It's hard for me because, as you can tell, it's such a holistic thing. It's very hard to get very specific, but I do that. But this is really what sacred storytelling looks like to me. That when you connect this relationship between spirit and earth, the nature of connection, the essence nature of connection comes alive. And it brings you into connection with other people. It brings you into connection with communities. And when you combine that with the connecting to the kind of the most ancient tool that humans were given, which is this language of story, which is symbol, meaning, and metaphor, it brings us into the wholeness of what we are as multidimensional beings, more than what is seen. It brings us into the whole story. It brings us more vitality. It brings us more life. It brings us more ways of being in community together. And when this happens, when you really do this, you can't help but be a little bit more magnetic. People sense and they feel that life around you. You start radiating a little bit more. So and wisdom starts to flow for you, and people start turning to you as a guide. Because they see that you have committed yourself to living in the not just a black or white way, but in a bigger way. And so it really does build stronger relationships. You cannot escape out of this experience at having experienced some aspect of personal growth. It's going to give you more skills for how to be resilient in a quickly changing world and how to really put your reins on how to shape and frame the story that you live within. It helps you give an exercise and practices for how to bring more clarity. And dare I say, it brings more peace, ease, and joy. And it's just gosh darn fun. So that's that. So, in terms of if you're asking, is this for me? Some of the questions that you might have is, you definitely want more than a writing class. This is not just your mom and pop's writing class. You want that more life force. You want to feel more alive in life. You want more community. You want more creative practices. You want some more resilience and joy and all that kind of good stuff. You might have stories that that need to be told, and you want a place to hold them, but it's not just any place. And you might also really want to be refining something in your own personal work and livelihood. You might also be saying, I really want to not just do this for myself, I want to do this for others. So those are some of the things that come to mind in terms of if you know that this is for you. Are you having?
Leah,
Yes.
you froze before you told us what segments 4 and 5 were about. Could you
Oh,
possibly
really?
on that?
It froze before I could tell you what all the programs were about?
Yeah.
The last you did through section 3, and we
Oh,
didn't hear section 4 and 5.
well, let me give you that. Hold on. I'm also going to give you some, while we're here, I'm just going to give you some things in the chat. So I just want to answer some questions. Is it possible to omit a few hours? And the answer is yes. It's like ideally, the best thing to do is come live. That's like I would be lying upside down and right side out if I said that you're going to get the same thing out of the recordings. It's not the same. But what I will say is that that's kind of the beauty of being in our modern day world. And like each module is recorded, you'll have a schedule, which ones you can make. We do have busy lives. And the power of getting to have small groups that you work with is that you can go back, you can watch the videos together, and you can then do real-time practice. And so that's what I would recommend. If you can't come live, just make sure that you have someone to practice, because it's not a passive class. It's a you're doing stuff class. And you want that connection and participation piece. But yes, we ran a beta in December, and because I didn't know if this new kind of program was going to really work. And when we ran it, we were all shocked at how much aliveness was in it in terms of this slightly different approach. And so we discovered that a lot of people could come the whole time, and then some people couldn't come all the time, but they came a lot of the time. And so it really did work in terms of being able to watch the recordings. So you do get a private space. I'm going to give you a bunch of links over here in the chat. And what you're seeing one is you're seeing a link to the whole, registration page, so you can go see all the details. I'll go back and talk about module 4 and 5. This second link right here is a discovery session. So if you have more questions and you're thinking, I think this might be for me, but I'm not quite sure, and it's a really big commitment, I recommend that you can schedule a session. And also, if you want to stay on a little bit later after this call, I'll do that right now today. And then if you're saying, well, this is cool, but I don't want all that, I just want a little dip. We have a monthly membership, and that we meet 3 times a month, and you get a new moon. It's an oracle story that I do a divination from. We do a full moon where we all come together and create a vision story, and then I do a 2-hour creative jam where you get some creative assignment and we create. And right now it's $33 a month, which is like a ridiculous giveaway when you get 2, 4, 5 hours worth of live classes, for $33 a month. So that price is going to go up. So I would just say, if you think that you want that, that's going to be there for you right there. Any other questions before I go back and talk about module 4 and module 5? Let me pick those up. So, module 4, it's you are going into the mythos. You know who's going to be one of our teachers on this is someone that a lot of people know is whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. Is Josh from the Emerald podcast.
Yeah, that's correct.
And we've got a lot of people will also be going into fairy tales and how do we understand how to use those in our everyday lives. And so we're really going to be taking that journey into the mythic imagination. But in module 4, what I'm specifically focusing on is how to tell and create medicine stories. This is not a retelling of your same story. A medicine story is a story where you actually call forth for guidance from the unseen world to come through a story that you then get to nourish. It's like going to the pharmacy and saying, I need a story for grief. Help me. You might just go get a rom-com on Netflix, or you might create and call for your own story for yourself that will bring healing. Module 5 is alchemy and creation. We'll be focusing on vision stories, but we're also putting it all into practice. And what I did was I created a little open space for module 5, partly because our certification students are going to be doing some of their presentations and practicums, and partly because I'm a wise enough artist in the realm of this space to know that things are going to come alive during the time of our program. And I wanted to make sure I reserved a little bit of mystery for module 5 so that we could actually get to what is really present in the world and be focusing and speaking to that. So that is module 5. Any other questions right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Barbara.
Hi. This has been wonderful and just so affirming for so many reasons. My question is, if I can't make a module, right, I know I can't make the first one.
Yeah.
Can I jump into the second one, or do you have to take them all? If I'm not interested in right now being certified, how does that work?
Yeah. So there's 2 different price points. You can say, all I want are the modules and just give me the goods, or it's not just quite, doesn't quite sound like that, but
I understand.
that's the piece. Then that price I think is 2,900. And it breaks down to being like $33 an hour, just so you guys know. And so when I was really looking at this, I was like, it was really important for me to create a program that was, we know that expenses are getting high, but to create it as affordable as possible. And so that was, one of the pieces I was really looking at focusing on this. You can pay that all in one payment. You can do it in payment plans. When you do an upfront pay at once, we take a couple $100 off that. And when you pay all at once for certification program, we take $400 off. So just so you understand, the reason is because we don't have to pay as much. And so when we get out of the processing systems, and so we pass along the savings. I'm going to run the first module again in June, I think 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th story. And so just so you know, so if you can't make the May one, you can do the second one. You can come to just one module. If you're like, all I want is wisdom stories, you can come to that just one module. You'll jump into it. And that was another part of the design, is that yes, you can, it builds on each other. The group will be creating a lexicon and we'll be going on a journey together. That's for real. But they're also designed to fully stand on their own, where you'll get a very rich experience. Each module has at least 3 guest teachers, including myself. So there's a real journey that we go on in that space. And when you sign up for the whole program, you get all the recordings. So that's there. I think that answered that question.
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much.
Someone just asked, am I going to teach this again? I'm not planning on it. I think this is my last time teaching this, this kind of course and this kind of content. And so this is kind of my own graduate program and accumulating everything that I've learned, not just for the individual, but to also support people who want to help other people tell their story. And so it's that's what I know about it. I'm not planning on teaching it again.
If, Leah, if we are able to just come to 1 or 2 modules, then it's not possible to be in one of the small groups, is that right?
Yeah. So what I do is I offer the small groups for people who are in the whole program.
Mhm.
And that's how that works. What I'll say also is that when you sign up for all the modules, you get $100 off of each module. So you end up saving $500. And that's how that's designed. Nancy is asking, yes, when you do a module live, you always get the recordings and you can have access to them forever. And one of the other things that we're doing this year was that I was really playing with the whole in-person thing. Because isn't it fun to be in person? Like we all know that, and yet isn't it amazing that we've got people from Rome and Norway and Mexico City, and like that's also this really incredible thing. So what we've been trying to do is, I've been saying, like, if you want to like put a pod or put an announcement out in your local community and create a local pod, I do reduced rates for when you do that. We also have affiliate programs. So if you're also one of those people that's like, I've got a crazy network and I want to put this out into them, it's like we do all kinds of ways of saying thank you and reducing tuition for those kinds of things. But also we'll be consciously saying, okay, once we're in there, who lives in the same region? Do you guys want to get together and be close to each other when we actually do these monthly things? I tried to actually do one in the Bay Area. We just didn't have enough people to create an in-person retreat. And so I kind of surrendered and said, okay, that's not my mountain to climb. But I am inspired just because when I do these courses, I like to be in person too. So it's like we're inspired to help people find their neighbors and communities if they want to come to be together in person during this training. So that makes sense. So, all right. So you drop the in-person course. Nancy, you know what? I had one person from the Bay Area, which is where I offered the first one to be in person register. And so not to say that it's not all over. And if, in the next couple of days, we get, 6 or more people, I'll hold both an in-person and online. But otherwise, no, it didn't make sense. Okay, Alice. Great. Okay. I'm going to turn off the recording. If anyone has personal questions or wants to stay on for a little one-on-one, I'll stay on for a little bit longer. And otherwise, we can say adieu.